Bridges to Change. We begin with a sigh of relief, who has recently been released from jail after serving a grueling 2.5 months. He was indicted on 11 Class A felony counts, each with a potential 5 to 25-year consequence in prison. So it's more than fair to say Cy's life had literally been on the line for nearly 80 days straight. The results had turned out to be nothing short of a miracle. Time served and 5 years of probation. Cy had finally accepted that his last adventure had been potentially just that, and now, given a new shot at life, he settled into his new room and began readjusting. That's when the news came. One final blow amidst the first breath of relief he had been able to take in months. "Cy, I have some bad news," his mother said over the phone. By the tone of her voice, Cy already knew what was coming. "I had Aaron go over to your studio, and it looks like the owner has cleared out your space." "Okay, what do you mean? Where did he put my stuff?" "Cy, we don't know, but Aaron asked the guys at the computer place next door, and they said it's all been thrown away." "Thrown away? Mom, I mean my camera stuff, my hard drives, all my work, my life." "Cy, we're doing the best we can, but they said that yesterday some guys came and literally cleared it all out and threw it in the dumpster." "Okay, that is not good." "No, it's not. That can't be, though. Nobody would just throw away an expensive camera, all my lights, and hard drives. I mean, Mom, that's every hard drive and backup I've ever had since my very first movie. All my songs, everything was in there." "I know, sweetie, I know, but it's not looking good." "Mom, I need to go." The lump that had been building in Cy's chest was finally swallowed, and Cy fell in a fresh variety of sorrow to his bed. There was nowhere to go, no thought to think. He had surrendered long before this point and was too tired to wave any white flags any longer. It had been nearly 5 months since I had been released from jail and transferred to Bridges to Change, an inpatient treatment program in Northeast Portland. About 10 of us lived together in the facility, an old 3-story townhouse with a small garden, basketball hoop, and smoking area. We were allowed 5 smoke breaks a day, in between a rigorous schedule of self-help groups and home-cooked meals, purchased with each our required generosity of $300 in food stamp benefits. Then, lights out at 10 p.m. sharp. Visits with approved family members and friends were limited to 3 one-hour slots a week that needed to be requested and approved the week before. Due to COVID, the program was no longer offering any field trips. So, in short, my summer had been miserable. Around 3 a.m., I lay awake in my tiny bed, anxious and unable to sleep, as I was nearly every night. It was far too hot. During the last 4 hours of trying to get relaxed enough to drift off, my sheets and blankets had all slowly found their way to the floor. Frustrated and unable to quiet my brain, I decided, for the 3rd time that night, to pick up a new book I was reading, Brain on Fire. Mom had ordered it for me, thinking I might relate to the main character, a girl in her early 20s who had a promising career in journalism, but then, all of a sudden, went crazy and lost it all. So far, the only part of the book I could relate to was the girl's constant sense of, what the is going on, and a general underlying and pending doom. I had never gotten so far in a novel, only a few chapters from the end. This would be the first book I would ever finish. The biggest difference between her and me was that, given her condition had been properly assessed and determined life-threatening, she had developed a good relationship with a prominent doctor whom she trusted. Eventually, she accepted her illness and took the steps necessary to get better. I, on the other hand, felt far more insane than anything she had described in her book, and despite my life being in perpetual jeopardy for nearly the last 2 years, all the doctors told me was, "You're a drug addict. Oh, and by the way, your serotonin receptors are permanently damaged, so you'll never be happy in the way you remember ever again. And no, we will not give you Adderall to make you feel better. Oh, and also, you're bipolar, so take all this shit that levels you out and kills your creativity and drive completely. You're doing great, kid." "Fuck you," I had told that doctor, storming out to weep in the parking lot until my ride-to-care driver would transport me back to this mild-mannered hellhole. There it was. I was back to miserable daydreaming and had completely lost my place on the page. "F this book, I'll finish it tomorrow," I hissed to myself, slapping Brain on Fire shut and tossing it back on my nightstand. Then, I stood up, and far too fast, starting to black out and welcoming the little stars that came with a high-pitched sound of nothing, a moment of peace. I collapsed in front of the window, nearly cracking my skull open, but caught myself. Such an event occurred fairly often, as my new favorite pastime was huffing air duster and playing the knockout game, sophisticated poison that was too cutting edge for the UAs to pick up. Air duster was peace of mind in a can. But before you go thinking I was too much of a square, check this. I slowly opened the window and retrieved the half-smoked cigarette I had been hiding on the roof. Then I smoked it. Yep, it's fair to say I was still a bad boy to the bone. Fast forward, and I'm sitting across the desk from the fat, bitch-faced umbrage lady who runs this lovely establishment, giving her the absolute schmooziest game plan possible for my upcoming transition back into the ordinary world. Things weren't all bad, though. I could finally get it up again and had been having enjoyable overnight sex sessions at Sarah's house. I would fuck her until the wee hours of the morning before Ferris Buellering my way back to a 6 a.m. sex ed class. This class usually started with some well-intentioned discussion points and devolved into all of us reminiscing about how much better sex was on meth and how we would probably never enjoy it the same again. I, too, was often consumed by this terrible fear, but was doing my best to fuck it into oblivion every chance I got. Okay, I'll read this over again when I have time, and we'll see how much thought you've put into it, said Umbridge, just seconds after barely skimming my 10-page release plan I had spent the last week preparing for her. Cool. Do you have any idea how long-ish? I asked in the most polite tone I could possibly stretch over my meaningless words. Cypress, she snapped, peering over her thick oval glasses with those beady eyes. You know how busy I am, especially with the budget cuts. I'll get to it when I have time, and you will be notified. Notified? Awesome. I'll just be in my room or, somewhere else, I said sarcastically, turning on my heels, rolling my shoulders, and quickly exiting her office. Had I looked her in the eyes during such a sarcastic remark, I would have surely been sent straight to prison, or perhaps even eaten in one whole bite. Who knows, with that woman? Fantasies of relieving the world of an evil like Umbridge served as better food for thought than any premature celebration of my potential release. My release plan was truly a whole load of that I was now used to scooping together on command for freedom credits. Putting any truth into such an exercise was virtually impossible, as the notion of truth had been, and was becoming ever more annoyingly complex. Life itself had become nothing more than a dusty web of sticky bullshit, bound by popular opinion and laid from the dry, shriveled butts of spiders from yesteryear. I sat, stoned in my own company, deep in conversation with the last character standing, my own personal comic relief. Metaphor. So dwindled my dull summer, on the picnic bench in the front yard nobody used, attempting to write a book about what had happened to me. I figured I'd start at the part when my best friend told me what it was like seeing someone get shot in the face at close range, and then, after some further digging on my part, how effortless and unemotional it had been to dismember and bury the body thereafter. Then, of course, the homeless man he had run over in his sports car, bragging to me and showing me pictures and video of his cracked, bloody windshield and the man lying lifeless in the street. Not long after, he crashed that sports car into the living room of his parents' home. Having found it hard to believe, had I not been watching it in real time happening on his cell phone, I had dug even further and asked why his mother still let him live there and had seemed so mechanically pleasant the day before when I had met her, tripping my balls off on ecstasy. That then, of course, led into the ultimate eye-opener. I had unknowingly befriended the son of one of the biggest mobsters of all time. This was, of course, something I hesitated to write about and rarely mentioned to anyone in Portland. Firstly, as the response across the board was, "Cool story, sigh," and to damn any therapeutic venting further, whenever I did try to start up a conversation on the mental repercussions this had, the details themselves were far too over the top and gruesome. When discussed in any seriousness, they turned people way the f*** off, even disturbing them to the point of changing the conversation and hoping I just had a weird, sick sense of humor before calling it a day. Who am I to blame anyone, though? I'd think the same thing if someone came to me with a story like that, and until I actually had gone through it myself, I would have had less than zero idea on how to properly arrange this new evidence of evil into any case for a morally sound philosophical remedy. See there, it's too wordy and intricately personal to me still now to touch with a 10-foot pole. So, long story short, my book was I tried writing it from the perspective of Kid Zeus, whom I had now accepted as a complete flop of an alter ego, stranded in a cave on an island with Kid Hades to cover as my new murderous friend. But no, in reality, I had been laid out on a neon beach set I had built in my film studio in Hollywood, realizing as I heard what was nothing less than pure evil venting from my only friend left, that perhaps this whole world was in fact. A knock came weeks later on my door. It was Umbridge, handing back my release proposal and begrudgingly telling me it was suitable. Most likely, it was only because word had been spreading that I was getting sexually molested by one of her staff members, a cute 23-year-old Mexican girl they had hired on. A week-long investigation followed by my stating in front of the board that I did not feel threatened or in danger, and that she had, in fact, not giving me a in the basement pantry, had sadly come to its ultimate conclusion in her being fired, blocking my number, and me having my release plan approved no later than that very week, making me the quickest to graduate the program in its entire history. For me, it was off to Erica's house, the small guest room that was on occasion rented out to a lucky friend of the month, but was now once again cluttered by her signature state-of-the-art hoarding operation. My mother and I spent long hours back and forth to one of her many storage lockers, cleaning it out. I knew this situation was only temporary and figured it was my only hope now at getting any Adderall, which my brain was in desperate need of. Once I was free from this treatment prison and all the useless noise that surrounded it, I figured I could finally find enough peace there and dial in my perspectives for another moderately acceptable stretch of sustainable being alive. It seemed promising at first. My body felt good. I had lost 20 pounds and bench pressed my way into being more cut than I had ever been at 185 pounds. But aside from my rekindled romance with Sarah, there was nowhere else to show it off. I felt undesirable at best, and the few times I did sneak out to get a drink with an old friend, there were no good times being had, only awkward conversations about how my life had been turned upside down, judgmental looks and parenting with every drink, followed by, "I care about you, Cypress, and hopefully we'll see each other again sometime." The anger in me built steadily, and I kept it all to myself. When I tried finding healthy ways to express it through creativity, it seemed none of my pathways to temporary satisfaction were accessible any longer. My mother and father had been so thankful for the new choices I was making that they had gifted me an expensive studio mic I had been recording on with Chase in Los Angeles, along with a laptop and my usual music programs. I had all the tools for success, except the ones that really mattered: my own sense of reason, purpose, and drive. I could hear it in my irritable voice that seemed to have lost all the beauty I was used to. My new single, Beautiful, which had been long overdue and way overhyped, was finally released, and with a small marketing budget, it reached only around 10,000 people. Not the millions my producer had promised me, nor the shout-outs from bigger artists like DaBaby, whom Chase had said loved the song and potentially wanted to feature on my next track. Now, I had fallen off the face of the earth for quite a bit, and to say we didn't strike while the iron was hot would be a fierce understatement. But all the same, the success of my partnership with Chase and the music we were making had been the last shred of hope my spirit had held on to during my time locked away and in treatment, especially now in losing my studio and everything of any value I had ever created in my life. My supposedly indomitable spirit and soul had been simply obliterated, and 10,000 plays and a shout-out from Raz Kass were simply too thin a rope to hold up my weight any longer. I needed something new, something better, something more exciting, something I could trust that would be worth the excruciating effort I put into every little thing I had done prior to this point in my life. But it seemed my reward was jail, a plea of insanity, an empty mailbox, and more online insults and death threats than I had time to read. When I tried to figure out why the world suddenly hated me so much, I needed to look no further than my own tattooed face reflecting off my laptop screen and the empty voice coming out of it. What I recorded sounded so bad, I almost couldn't even believe it. I had to find old exports of beats I had made and re-record old songs just to test if what I was hearing had any merit. As I listened back, I cried. My worst fears did, in fact, have some merit. It was plain as day. I could not perform even the songs I had written and recorded 5 years ago at anywhere close to an acceptable level. My timing was off, my voice was trash, and the meaning behind my words was indistinguishable to me from a plastic recycling bin. As I heard that new voice of mine, I wished I had a gun to end it all quickly. I began searching for Erica's stash of muscle relaxers and downers to do the job, but she got home too soon, and I was forced to take a walk outside. I walked to a tunnel where I had shot my very first film, where I had stood for a photo that would be on the front page of the Oregonian, telling the story of my rise from a troubled F student to a determined filmmaker with a 4.0, destined for nothing but greatness. I hated that kid, and thinking I had spent my infantile success celebrating with a friend who was only lying in wait to finish me off when I finally broke sickened me all over again. Every person I knew or could think of sickened me. Their words, their support, were nothing but foul, blown air from scared, unmotivated nobodies who benefited and thrived off my energy until they sucked it dry and left me a nobody. Why would I ever waste a breath, a beautiful story, or a redemptive, uplifting jingle on this mass population of highly opinionated, drama-infused fools? Trying to call me drama, I scoffed to myself. The nerve. The only thing they ever achieved was burning my hard work to the ground and confusing my over-emotional, highly susceptible family into believing it was my undoing and not theirs. That's why I can't sing, I thought. I'm doing it for the wrong people and the wrong reasons. In that moment, I felt lucky for not having fallen into the greatest trap of all, fame at the hands of slippery snake people. If I was going to have any chance at redemption, it would not be through the avenues set up by the willfully blind and ignorant. I would see my way to new heights by the dark code only known to a rare few. A code that I knew now, starting with my psychopathic old friend Hades, was slowly revealing itself to me through the universe. Whoever God was, he was not who most people thought. However, he was also not evil, just misunderstood. Why else would Hades back in LA have such undeniable charm and an uplifting, positive spirit? It was no coincidence that he and Ross Cass had been my only solace and that they and my mother had inexplicably shared the same birthday. There was something so clear here, such a direct path to follow that I had been so blind to, so ignorant in my seeking of approval from others. Under the scaffolding of these new thought patterns, I was able to quickly dispose of the incessant negativity that had plagued me now for 7 months. The sky was a pale blue, and the view from this tunnel began hinting at a new tomorrow, one I could not only stomach, but was becoming increasingly hungry for. How would I move forward? By lying, of course, to everyone who loved me. The hard truth and my inability to censor it had clearly landed me here, and so here I would either die or find a new way to live. The truth was nothing more than an instrument at my disposal for crafting my own well-being. Of course, it was, thank God or whoever, my innocence had crumbled just in time. Determination and happiness, in their most primal form, began harvesting nourishment from whatever natural direction I selected. Straight down to the Ross Island Bridge, I fell effortlessly. Approaching the dirtiest man with the most beautiful spirit I had felt in years, I collapsed into his arms, and he began to laugh. "Hey there, my friend," he said, patting me on the back. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything is amazing. Finally," I responded, pushing myself out of the embrace and putting my hand on his shoulder. "Tell me you got some clear." "Well, I think I might, actually. It's back at my tent. It's just over here." "May I partake with you?" I asked. "Of course, what's mine is yours," said the man. We entered the walls of his sanctuary near the on-ramp to the bridge, amidst late night's rush-hour traffic. The loud sound of engines and courtesy honking were immediately drowned out of existence, muffled and overtaken by the kind spirit of my new friend. He sat as if at the end of a long, hard day's work and took a bubble pipe from his backpack, offering it first to me. "No, you go ahead. I'll have whatever's left, I said, smiling. My new thoughts and decisions seemed to be immediately paying off, and in no longer than 5 minutes after thinking them, opened up an entire new and beautiful world to me. This was a man I could trust. He told me stories of little acts of kindness he had committed throughout the day, and went on to express how glad he was to meet me, and that he was surprised he had never seen me around these parts before. I told him I lived close, just a few blocks away, and that I walked here every day, but that I had also never seen him before. Well, maybe you were looking through the wrong eyes, he said. It's amazing what we can ignore when we're set in our ways. Amen, brother, I responded, verging on tears, had I not been so relieved by the first inhale of what was for me at the time the only medicine I had ever known to actually work. God, it's been a long time. As I exhaled, now relaxed and completely at ease, I added, I've demonified this for so long, they almost had me tricked again. Yeah, I've been taking my medicine for 40 years, he responded. Never been happier in my life. Is there anything we can do about it? I asked, nodding at the traffic and insinuating the rest of the world. I've tried, he said, and I lost everything and everyone in my life. But you know what? They lost me, and I know that now. But if you don't walk God's path, you will never find true happiness, and that's more important than anyone's opinion. Their opinion. You seem like a good dude, and I'm glad your eyes are starting to open again. Don't ever forget who you are. I won't, I assured the man and myself, standing to my feet. Right then and there, I would love to stay, but I have music to make, I announced. The man began laughing. Oh, cool, you make music? I got a guitar, man. Well, you know what? Once I get this song out of my head, I'll come back later and we can play together. Sound good? Whenever you want, dude. Now you know where I am. Come by anytime. I will, I said, leaving. I really will. The walk back to Erica's was invigorating. I had not needed much, just a little, just one hit of pure it, and it seemed I was cured. Clear lyrics, clever words, words that had undeniable just cause in meeting, danced through and out and through again. I could hear the harmonies. I could touch the various inflections through my fingertips and onto my legs into existence. Bursting through the door, I collapsed onto my chair. Without so much as flipping the light switch in my room, I was instantly lit up by my glowing computer screen and delved into a new project, as if I was reborn and embodied the essence of creativity itself. As I briefly thought about what to name the project, my fingers had already typed in A New Hope, which I quickly laughed off as being unbearably cheesy and too clear a description of what I knew was coming. Instead, I thought of a new light, a new point of reference, a new sun. But then, in the darkness, I considered a new light to guide me and titled my new adventure, There's a Moon. And so there was.